Welcome to Matflix, video streaming from maternity experts. My name is Dr. Jenny Hall. I am the box sets curator at Matflix, a fellow of the Royal College of Midwives and a former editor of The Practicing Midwife. At Matflix, we bring together videos of talks from top maternity experts into box sets to support your continued professional development, study and revalidation. It is a perfect study accompaniment for midwives, maternity professionals, midwifery students and anyone thinking about a career in the maternity services. My job is bringing together the latest thinking area by area so you do not have to. Not only do you get the video of brilliant talks and relevant content in thematic box sets, you also get access to the audio version so you can listen on the commute or while you walk the dog. Plus links to the latest research in the relevant field, government policy documents, the presenter's PowerPoint and more besides. Sign up to Matflix now for the best video streaming from maternity experts.
It's always a pleasure to be here, and I always try as hard as I can to support this excellent platform that's so flexible, that's responsive, that's contemporary, that's in people's homes, in people's pockets and in people's hands, wherever they happen to be.
I'm Nicole Rajan Brown. I'm a proud midwife and I'm proud to be supporting the Maternity and Midwifery Forum, who have helped me to grow, and for creating wonderful professional digital and online resources for midwives across the globe. The Maternity and Midwifery Forum ran their programmes free and online all through COVID. Now we want to grow the catalogue, spread it worldwide and keep it free to use for students and staff. To do this, we have launched a fundraising appeal to help keep all of the 8 wonderful maternity and midwifery festivals free. Keep the weekly Maternity and Midwifery Hour and the weekly newsletters free to midwives and maternity staff. You regularly tell us how much you value these free resources, so do give what you can.
Welcome to Matflix, video streaming from maternity experts. My name is Dr. Jenny Hall. I am the box sets curator at Matflix, a fellow of the Royal College of Midwives and a former editor of The Practicing Midwife. At Matflix, we bring together videos of talks from top maternity experts into box sets to support your continued professional development, study and revalidation. It is a perfect study accompaniment for midwives, maternity professionals, midwifery students and anyone thinking about a career in the maternity services. My job is bringing together the latest thinking area by area so you do not have to. Not only do you get the video of brilliant talks and relevant content in thematic box sets, you also get access to the audio version so you can listen on the commute or while you walk the dog. Plus links to the latest research in the relevant field, government policy documents, the presenter's PowerPoint and more besides. Sign up to Matflix now for the best video streaming from maternity experts.
It's always a pleasure to be here, and I always try as hard as I can to support this excellent platform that's so flexible, that's responsive, that's contemporary, that's in people's homes, in people's pockets and in people's hands, wherever they happen to be.
I'm Nicole Rajan Brown. I'm a proud midwife and I'm proud to be supporting the Maternity and Midwifery Forum, who have helped me to grow and for creating wonderful professional digital and online resources for midwives across the globe. The Maternity and Midwifery Forum ran their programmes free and online all through COVID. Now we want to grow the catalogue, spread it worldwide and keep it free to use for students and staff. To do this, we have launched a fundraising appeal to help keep all of the 8 wonderful maternity and midwifery festivals free. Keep the weekly Maternity and Midwifery Hour and the weekly newsletters free to midwives and maternity staff. You regularly tell us how much you value these free resources, so do give what you can.
Welcome to Matflix, video streaming from maternity experts. My name is Dr. Jenny Hall. I am the box sets curator at Matflix, a fellow of the Royal College of Midwives and a former editor of The Practicing Midwife. At Matflix, we bring together videos of talks from top maternity experts into box sets to support your continued professional development, study and revalidation. It is a perfect study accompaniment for midwives, maternity professionals, midwifery students and anyone thinking about a career in the maternity services. My job is bringing together the latest thinking area by area so you do not have to. Not only do you get the video of brilliant talks and relevant content in thematic box sets, you also get access to the audio version so you can listen on the commute or while you walk the dog. Plus links to the latest research in the relevant field, government policy documents, the presenter's PowerPoint and more besides. Sign up to Matflix now for the best video streaming from maternity experts.
It's always a pleasure to be here, and I always try as hard as I can to support this excellent platform that's so flexible, that's responsive, that's contemporary, that's in people's homes, in people's pockets and in people's hands, wherever they happen to be.
Welcome everybody, this week's Maternity and Midwifery Hour. My name's Sue MacDonald and I'm the happy curator of the Midwifery and Maternity Hour and the Midwifery and Maternity Festivals, and it's my pleasure to be chairing this evening's session. And we're joined by two doctors, Dr. Sarah Azagbona, I hope that's correct, Sarah, Adiegba, is that correct? I'm close. And Jenny Hall. These two wonderful midwives, and I'm sure are known by a lot of people, but we're going to, because they're here, we're going to put them on the spot and ask them to share their moment of the week, because I know that we have some colleagues watching for whom this is a real treat to know what our guest moment of the week is. So can I ask Sarah to share your moment of the week this week?
Sure, just that I saw some daffodils starting to sprout their heads. I think that's spring, and there's going to be longer days, which is great. I always enjoy the longer days. Yeah, so that's fantastic.
Lovely, and that's a lovely thing to share, actually. So it's funny because last week there seemed to be no flowers about at all, did there? Now they're all poking up, and what do they know? Brilliant. Jenny, do you have a moment of the week you can share? No.
But actually, what I was going to say was that we have a very urban garden where we are, and we had a pair of thrushes in our garden, which was amazing. For those of you who don't know much about birds, actually having thrushes these days is quite rare.
Oh, wow.
And there's a pair of them we think are nesting in the trees behind us, but it was just wonderful just to watch them. But the crocuses, yeah, I love the crocuses. They're coming up. They're purple and yellow, and yes, it's just lifting our spirits, isn't it, to have a bit of sunshine?
Does, yeah. And absolutely, and the sunshine's arrived this week. Has it?
Yeah, a little bit.
Certainly in the southeast, it's sunny. And I'd forgotten what a sunny day and blue sky was like. So it's fantastic. Thank you so much. Now I'm going, Sarah and Jenny now going to have a little rest before their presentations while I just do the usual welcome to everybody. Now I know we'll have some new people today and we'll have some old friends. So welcome to both of you. For those new people, the Maternity and Midwifery Hour was born 5 years ago. I can't believe I'm saying this, 5 years ago, right at the outset of the COVID-19 lockdown, the very first one in the UK, where we really wanted to make sure that midwives and student midwives, people in maternity services, could actually link up and learn something or have some new information. And initially we did a lot about COVID and we did a lot about the changing services. And now we're carrying on 5 years later with all sorts of other things that we think are of interest to midwives and student midwives and other people within the maternity services. And we do have some mums I know and parents, and we also have people who want to become student midwives, and we have people from all over the world, which is fantastic. So wherever you are in the world, just let Paul know in the chat and we can share that so everybody knows where you're from, especially Sarah and Jenny. Now, I'm also going to say a big thank you to people at the moment, because you'll notice I've got a bit of a husky voice, very nice little husky, but that was the cold I've had. And I know there's a whole load of bugs going around and people are having to work that bit harder to cover for people who are off sick. So well done and keep going with what you're doing. And a big thank you as well. Now, this week, it's National Women's History Month, and this is an international thing. And I've put some links in the resources, and that's half to remind me to tell you about the resources, because there's some delicious reading there for you. And there's certainly some resources from the BBC. Some of it is for kids, but actually they're really good stories about what women have achieved over the years and just challenging our thinking a bit. And there's also an international link to especially women who are facing war, and that's fairly, it seems as though there's a lot of war going on in our world at the moment. It's horrible, but this is more positive in the fact of what women are doing to kind of survive and prosper. And also the Historical Association, which is a charity, I think, based in the UK. So also that link is fantastic. Some really interesting things just to immerse yourself in a bit of history. I think if we don't know where we've come from, how can we know where we're going? That's my little motto. Now, I'm also going to do a tribute, because I thought this came at the weekend and I was really touched by this. And this is James Harrison, who's an Australian man who's actually reputed to have saved the lives of more than 2 million babies. Can you imagine having that in your soul? Isn't that fantastic? And that was through really regular blood donation. And he died this weekend, which is very sad. He's nicknamed the man with the golden arm, and he donated his blood over 1,100 times, providing this rare antibody, which is actually anti-D. And those of you who are a bit rusty on anti-D, off you go to your textbooks just to check out what that actually gives those babies and saves those babies. Fantastic. There's also a really interesting NIHR research that provides evidence to back the safety and effectiveness of COVID-19. I thought that was very timely, given we're into March and we're in the sort of birth of the maternity hour with that first lockdown. And this vaccine for pregnant women, they compared women who weren't vaccinated and women who vaccinated during pregnancy. And those women who vaccinated during pregnancy had a reduced risk of blood pressure disorders during pregnancy, giving birth by cesarean section, and their newborn needing admission to intensive care. So good. We like vaccination. It's a good thing. Okay. And then I've got a final call for Nick. You remember Nicolette last week was talking about her study. She's got another week. She's extended it by another week. So if you haven't filled in that questionnaire, and it's quite straightforward, and it's interesting being in this sort of work, just follow the link on the resources and just check it out and put your 2 penneth in. And I'm almost perfect timing this evening, which is fantastic. So we're going to look at research in midwifery, and I hope we've got lots of students listening and lots of academics, midwives, and also midwives, clinical midwives, because research is what really makes us tick. And what makes me really relish research in midwifery is things like this is a proficiency, which was based using the Lancet study. And also, gosh, that's our lovely Mary Renfrew, the Enabling Safe Quality Midwifery Services and Care in Northern Ireland, which was also led by Mary Renfrew. And what made both of those pieces of work really strong was evidence base, and we need it, and that makes us strong, and it reduces things like giving different advice to women and families in our care. So all those sort of things that come through research. So I'm so pleased where I have two fantastic speakers, and they both have their CVs online, and I'm delighted to welcome Dr. Sarah Ezebogna Adiegbe, Associate Professor of Midwifery at London South Bank University. She's a registered nurse and midwife for many years. She's worked in the UK and the USA and volunteered in Africa. She's an academic, speaker and author. So she's written lots of books and articles, and those are on your resource list. She also received the first Dora Opoko BAME Award to fund her PhD studies and the Anne Stewart Award for commitment to midwifery practice from the Iolanthe Midwifery Trust. Sarah completed her PhD at the University of Hertfordshire, exploring the perceptions of Nigerian women and midwives of cultural competency in antenatal care. So I'm delighted that Sarah's with us this evening, and welcome, Sarah. The screen is now yours.
Thank you.
And thank you for it's just usually a little delay.
You can see my first slide. So thank you, Sue, and thank you for the invite to talk this evening. So I'm going to be looking at the presence of Eurocentric research and alternative views and supporting the use of non-Western research methods. This is something that I started to explore a methodology which would be appropriate for the sample woman that I wanted to research. And in that case, it was migrant African women. And I kind of fell down this rabbit hole of looking at other methods which were not from the Western or were not from Western perspectives. So before I start, I just want to emphasize that, yes, the methods are important, but also just to remind people that the space where the research takes place is also important, and also reshaping and transforming researchers' identity is also of relevance. But I'm going to focus on the methods and the importance of those methods. So first of all, we need to look at our historical past and look at the impact of colonization. So we know that in our history, there were invasion of lands by powerful groups, and culture and political systems were enforced on indigenous people. And this happened across Africa, Asia, the Middle East, America, Australia, Canada, New Zealand. And these are just some of the places that were colonized. And if you think about colonization, the impact of that was the impact of enforcing knowledge that was embedded in Eurocentric theories. So in the present time, in the present context of today's world, a lot of the Western universities have Eurocentric theories in their establishments. And therefore, non-Western and indigenous knowledge is mainly disregarded. And so therefore, the premise is that research is constrained by Westernized methodologies. Now, what does that mean? It means for those indigenous populations, this is a word that probably is a little bit shocking, but this is a dirty word to mean being relevant. And knowledge is important because knowledge is used as a way to overpower those who have less knowledge. And in the current world's view of knowledge to others, however, there are alternative ways of viewing the world, but these are not considered. And therefore, because of that, some knowledge does remain invisible. And if you think about the importance of knowledge and the importance of non-Western approaches, if we are using Western approaches for researching non-Western populations, is that true knowledge that we are actually retrieving? And is there, in fact, a loss of real knowledge? And if you think about the UK, the context today of our childbearing population, it is very diverse. We have a very migrant population, particularly in the UK, and also a lot of Western countries. And so therefore, if we are researching individuals in this way, are we catering for all those individuals? And so therefore, is there justice in research? Because if you're not hearing the views of everyone, and only a small pocket of women are being presented in research studies, it means the voices of those who are not researched are not heard in policy, they're not heard in practice, and they're not heard in guidance. So how about if happen at all? However, we can't do that. And basically, that's not correct to do that because the past is our past. That's our history. We have to probably just accept it as it was. But can we correct the past and the impact of colonization? I think that's something that we probably need to start doing. So decolonizing research is an approach that challenges Eurocentric research methods. And within that, there is acknowledged different sources of knowledge, and the research is culturally sensitive. And that is the pathway that we need to start looking towards. Been around for a few decades now, this perspective of Eurocentric research. However, even though it's been around for a few decades, it's not actually present in our current context of midwifery research, or it's not evident. Experience, education, and learning. We go to school, we go into higher education, and we are taught that this is the correct way to acquire knowledge. And knowledge which is based on the idea that having a true belief is not sufficient to be valid in the Western context. And basically, when we look at the Eurocentric perspective, I believe that knowledge should be gained through systematic study data. And if you look at knowledge that is not achieved in this way, it's deemed to be insufficient. And therefore, this positions European perspectives as the norm and non-Western perspectives as deviations from the norm. So, what do you need to do about the current midwifery research practices? Do we need to adhere to what is acceptable? This is what we are taught. We are taught about research design and approaches, but these are mainly framed on Western perspectives. And this impacts on diverse views and other ways of knowing. But we know, and I think probably there's a lot of academics who talk about this, we know that there are other ways of gaining data. However, if you want to do a BSc, an MSc, you want to do doctorate studies, PhD studies, you want to get funding for a study, you have to adhere to these practices and these approaches because that's what they're looking for. This is deemed to be science, is deemed to be the correct way of doing research. So that's a problem there. So even if you're coming from the non-West to a Western part of the world to undertake a study in a university, and you may know that there are other ways of achieving knowledge in your own population, you have to adhere to this because this is what universities expect you to do. You probably could try and do it another way, but it might be quite difficult. And it just might prolong your studies, which you don't want to do. And if we look at the context of indigenous knowledge or non-Western knowledge, this is knowledge that is passed down, traditional knowledge passed down orally from generation to generation. It's normally culturally specific knowledge. It's unique to certain populations, but also could be useful to other populations. And so therefore, when you think about our migrant population in the UK and other parts of the Western world, this could be relevant in ensuring that they are researched appropriately and sensitively as well. And if we do continue to use Eurocentric research methods, this can lead to exclusion of other ways of knowing and being, and also may not be adequate for diverse individuals. And assumptions also can be made which are not always correct. And of course, we have the power imbalances as well, which occurs with that. So we need to have midwifery research that recognizes the past and the present, and that's what we need to aim for. So let's think about these non-Western perspectives. And let's focus on these methods that we can use. So they do originate outside of dominant Western tradition, academic tradition. No particular approach is deemed to be the most valid, can be any approach. We need to think about alternative methods to collect knowledge. And I've just picked out a few: storytelling, dance, singing, and drawings. And so for example, there's many oral cultures around the world, and in a lot of non-Western and indigenous populations, narrations, which are sacred stories, are used to hand down knowledge, if you like. So this unites past and present experience. And therefore, individuals' perceptions of birth could be researched by listening to those sacred stories. That's a wealth of knowledge that we really haven't explored fully. And if you look at Australian and American indigenous populations, there's something called yarning and talking circles which are used. And this is sharing of indigenous knowledge. And why can't it be a method that we use to research non-Western populations or people of different cultures? And then if you look at dance, song and dance has been used as a form of non-verbal communication. And it can be particularly useful for looking at people's views. And it can reveal cultural and traditional practices. And in African societies, pregnancy and childbirth are usually used rituals and birth songs to describe their experiences, and that can be useful. And then in some Asian cultures, we have dance news, and that can display deep cultural meanings and concepts around social structures as well. And then if we go on to look at drawings, now we know in the West, we can use visual ethnography and pictorial data collection methods to explore people's views of a certain experience. But also drawings and art is good because it enables the researcher to see the world through participants' eyes. And this is particularly useful for individuals who don't have a good command of English, they're not native English speakers, or there might be some other kind of language barrier. And this will be good for those who participate in research by using drawing as a data collection method. So what do we need to do? We need to make sure that in order to make sure that our research processes are more inclusive, we need to adopt research methods which are culturally sensitive, because it might be that the Western research methods, and I'm talking about we typically do interviews, focus groups, observations, surveys, questionnaires, may not always be culturally sensitive. And we need to think about valuing all knowledge. We need to value diversity and increase inclusivity. We need to cater for all cultures. We need to move away from this Western dominance in research. And if you think about embedding the presence of all knowledge, educational facilities need to start thinking about teaching different methods of collecting data and not the traditional Western methods. It really shouldn't matter what the methodology is. Gaining the knowledge is the most important thing that we should be trying to achieve. We need to step out of our comfort zone, because I think we are in this comfort zone of using these Western methodologies. And knowledge should be knowledge in any context, not just a scientific one. And so ideally, how about merging Western and non-Western perspectives? Tailoring research to the individuals that are being researched, and collaboration of different approaches to meet the needs. And now, what does it look like? It looks like maybe if you're doing a research study or project, there could be a myriad of methods that you're using, depending on who the person is you're having contact with. And that might be good. And that would go some way in reducing inequity in research participation, because we know there's an issue with people from certain backgrounds not participating in research. So then I thank you. That's it. That's the end of the presentation.
I'm just sort of I was been thinking about how one would go into a different complete, because you've thrown everything out. And of course, what the key thing that you said that really stayed was the whole system is set that you have to do it this way. And I was thinking, when you enroll for your master's, your PhD, you've got to go through a particular little hurdle, or set of hurdles actually, to get to where you need to go. Now you've just moved the hurdles a bit. So thank you for that. Now, if you have a question for Sarah, pop it into the chat box and Paul will send it through to me. And I'm looking over here because it's come through on my other screen, and we can discuss this at the end of the session. We should have about a quarter of an hour to fire some questions at Sarah and to Jenny as well. So thank you, Sarah. You can now catch your breath now and get prepared for a few questions. And I'm so pleased now to invite and welcome Dr. Jenny Hall. She's known to many of you as our Matflix editor. She's got a very varied career, especially as a midwife, an academic, a writer, an editor. And she's always had a bit of a creative thread, and I use the word thread advisedly, all the way through. And I have always had memories of Jenny's quilt and some knitted midwives, and I brought my knitted midwife along to remind any of you who were at a particular RCM conference a few years back where we all had to knit midwives, because it was a good way of telling politicians we needed more money for more midwives. So it's fantastic. We have Jenny here. She's a fellow of the Royal College of Midwives and senior fellow of the Higher Education Academy. So welcome, Jenny. The screen is now yours. And also to be honest.
Thank you very much. And to be quite honest with you, that I should be just talking to Sarah about her experience and about my experience of doing our PhDs and what that actually meant. So anyway, I'm talking about alternative research methods. I have to say that Sarah and I have not talked to each other before this evening, and so there is some overlap, and I think in conscious of the time, and I'm likely to go over. So I'm very sorry if that's the case, because I'll get told off. Anyway, thank you, Sarah. I could sit and talk to you for hours, for raising the importance of more inclusive research, and because it is so important, and I'm so pleased that you are doing this work. research can be fun. I want to take this further of what she's saying, actually, to think about midwifery and whether the methods that we are using for research in midwifery, full stop, or maternity services, are the right ones actually for our profession. So I'm going to talk about that. And for many of you, perhaps if you are students here, you may not have thought about this before. And actually, you might find research daunting, and Sarah has already sort of indicated some of that about how research is important. But finding out about new things can be exciting and playful if you want it to be, and if you're allowed to do it, which is also what she has indicated. But I'm just going to go back in history because I've been around for quite a long time. And when I was learning to be a midwife over my career, there was no research. We didn't have anything. That actually these two studies were the first ones that were done by midwives, published in 1980. Prior to that, the research was always being done by doctors. Midwives just didn't do research. And if you notice what she was talking about, she's talking about pre-delivery shaving and enemas. Now, for those of you who are as old in the tooth as me, you will know that when anybody was brought into hospital to have a baby, then they would have a shave, an enema, and a bath. And yes, it was big enemas. It wasn't the tiny little enemas that we have now. But no matter what stage of labour they were in, that's what they had to do. And Mona actually did this research and showed that it wasn't actually necessary to do that. And yes, there were a number of babies that were born in the bath. I will say that as well. And this book here is the Mays Midwifery textbook that I had. There's no research in it. And if you look at the Mays Midwifery now, which Sue knows very, very well, is that it's huge. And the amount of research that has been done in the past 45 years has developed so much. But at our time, what you did was everything was by rote, that you did everything without questioning, that you actually did what you were told to do. This is what you do for each woman. Well, actually, I did question, but that's another story, which I will not go into now. And then we moved on to this. We have moved on to this evidence-based culture, which is fantastic. And for those of you, again, who are pretty old in the tooth, is that we had ECPC, which we affectionately called it, which was actually a huge tome of research that had been gathered together. And the guide was much smaller than that. And you carried it around with you, which you could then use as evidence. And then since that time, we've obviously developed into nice guidelines since then. A piece of paper, which is not very good. There's nothing wrong with evidence. There's nothing wrong with research. I'm not disputing it at all. And I'm sure Sarah is not at all either as well, because it's important that we are providing the best care. So it's important that it's being done. But so much of midwifery practice still has been handed down from generations to generations and has not been researched and has not got evidence behind it. And then we come on to this issue actually about what is evidence, which I'll talk to you about in memory. But what we know, I hope you know, if what you're doing it, is midwifery is a multidimensional, holistic role. This is from the ICM definition of a midwife. And just by looking at that, you realise actually what the role of a midwife, what the role of maternity and caring for people is not simple. And we're dealing with human lives and human people. And Sue mentioned as well the NMC standards earlier. And again, they are full of what is expected of what midwives can and should be able to do. And it's holistic in what we do. And if you look at that statement down the bottom, is that it's expected that we provide this whole person care that meets each woman's individual needs. And we're doing the art and science. That's we'd always talk about. Midwifery is the art and science. There's a lot of research around about the science of midwifery, but not necessarily about the art side of it. You know, what is the essence of the art? And that's why I did my PhD study, which was around the essence of the art of midwife, all those years ago. But if midwifery is so multi-dimensional in this way, then why are we not doing this with our research methods? Sarah has already touched upon that already from a different perspective. Of course, there is a place for traditional and quantitative and qualitative research, but we do need to think further of what we are actually doing here. And then we have this other word that's added into it. Midwifery is one of the most ancient women-based professions, and I apologise to the male midwives when I say that, but it is women's-based. We're dealing with women's lives here, and it's had its roots in the local community with the skills required passed down through generations. Other writers talk about craft in relation to midwifery, the practical side of it, but also in terms of the personal dimension of being a midwife, expressed in the more instinctive actions of practice, and in the personality, the way of being, the background, the experience, and the intuition of the carer. I don't know if perhaps if you ever thought about the fact that your personality and way of being has an impact in what you are doing and how you are caring for people. And it's important that you do know that, of how you behave actually makes that difference. So going on to quantitative research, all numbers, Quantitative research is vital for large research projects to collect data across a broad population. But always remember, if you are applying evidence, for example, if you have a study that says for 70% of people or even 90% of people, this is the right thing to be doing. What about the other 30%? What about the other 10%? And it's that then you have your other knowledge that Sarah was talking about that comes in your practice about actually what are the other knowledges that we're using that is important to make those kinds of clinical decisions for people. And then in qualitative research, sorry, it's going quick. Is it all words? Qualitative research, we use interviews, we use surveys, and then we create themes around the participants and what they have said. But it's not showing the individuality of each of those people. It's breaking them down into these little parts. And it doesn't capture the meanings and the wholeness either of the people involved. So it's not what they say, but who they are that we are actually missing by doing those kinds of studies. Of course, we rely on numbers and words as they are relatively easy to measure and can be quick now, especially with computer programs. But even, putting computer programs for in vivo, which is used for qualitative research at the moment, it's only as good as the quality of the data that's been put in the first place. But the other thing is that you can miss the nuances, is that you're expecting this computer AI or whatever it is to do the answers for you, but actually the depth of it, you might be really missing the humanness aspect of it, which could be missing. So this is a quote that's always used for what is evidence and how we're using evidence. The conscientious, explicit, and a judicious use of current best evidence. So it's how is it being used judiciously in your work practice? What about the tacit knowledge that we have? What is it about touch, for example? Does that bring you a different type of knowledge? So you've got to think about actually what the knowledge are that we have. And I think as well, Sarah's brought in about the diversity side of it, which is also, again, important, very, very important. But I'm going to very clearly say this to you. Whatever method you choose is that it must fit the question you're asking. Because there's no good doing a huge, large research project on a huge population and then trying to do interviews on everybody, because that's not right. That's not how it fits. That's not how it works. So it's making sure that you do have the right methods for your study. And I also acknowledge that these days, majority of large studies also have mixed methods where they're doing a quantitative arm and then they're doing a qualitative arm as part of it, so that they're trying to get both sides of the story. So do get that very much. However, I've been very influenced by Peter Reason over the years, who talked about a different type of research, which he called sacred inquiry, where it's about humanness, about recognizing the human being that we are presenting. Are we presenting them as a whole? Are we presenting them as sacred? And how can we actually do this in midwifery? How can we actually capture the humanness of each person? How do we capture the humanness of our practice in what we are doing? And another way of looking at things is actually, what is our perspective in what we are doing? And this, it could be an illustration of quantitative research, is that you're flying over these wonderful tulip fields, that you're going over and you can see these broad bands of colour, which are all joined together. And you're getting this perspective right over from above. But what happens if you get in close to the tulip fields? Obviously, these are mixed tulips, and that's that. But even so, each of the tulips are different. They're individual. Even though if you try to do in a qualitative study that you're going to put all the reds together, or you're going to put all the yellows together, some of the yellows have got reds on them, and some of the purples have got white on them, that actually they've all got individual bits to them as well. So would it be better to have each individual tulip and talk to them individually? So anyway, that's how I like looking at it. But what I'm trying to say is, and I love this film, if you've never seen Big Hero 6, then I would recommend it. Very sad, but it's great. But look for the new angle. Look, when you're doing research, is to look at things differently. Don't just do what your university's telling you to. Okay, you can do it. It's risky, but you can do it. And we can talk about that in a minute. But look for things differently. Don't just take things as the status quo, and just because you want to hurry to get it over with as quickly as possible. So I'm going to talk about arts-based methods, and Sarah has already mentioned this within her talk as well, and about how arts-based methods can bring out the whole person. And I used these very much in my own research, which I will come on to in a moment. Art, we're often touched by looking at other people's art. And if you don't know who this is Gustav Klimt. And if you don't know Gustav Klimt, look up The Kiss, which is also one of his fabulous, fabulous paintings. And it's called The Mother and Child. When you look at this, each of you out there will get a different perspective of what this picture is about and what it means to you. And for some of you, it could be very meaningful. For some of you go, I don't like that very much. You know, but each of us is different in actually how we approach art and what it does to us inside. Let's move that on, sorry. Okay, if you don't know who this is, you're not either. This is Genesis. Okay, but what I'm trying to say is that art has the ability to meet your senses. It reaches inside you in different ways, especially sight and hearing, because we look at things and we listen to things. But perhaps that's something to do as well with memory, because associations of long forgotten places and times. If you look at pictures, they can remind you of landscapes or buildings or people. Or if you're looking at birth pictures, it can remind you of your own birth, or it can remind you of situations that you've been in. And they can make us relive moments in time. You can go to a play that actually speaks of your own lives, about your emotions, about your fears, about your own life stories, or reading poetry that stimulates sadness and sorrow and happiness and love. You can read life stories, which Sarah was talking about, stories portrayed as pictures in other people's words. That's why we still read books, because we like to read stories about things. and dance, which I'm very big fan of dance, because it may stimulate you to be physical as well. How often do you walk down, well, that's just me, but you walk down the street and you hear a piece of music or you see somebody dancing and you actually feel like you want to just join in, but it helps to understand your own bodies. It actually reaches inside your own bodies. Or hearing a song or a piece of music, that is a big trigger for a lot of people, which is why nostalgia is such a big thing at the moment, and bands are coming back. You not realize that. But it may bring you a very spontaneous or physical or an emotional reaction and take you back to a place where you remembered that song for the first time, or it actually triggered something in you. And people we associate it with, and places and our mind, it clicks in with the play button. I'm sure that you've had those kinds of experiences. And I put Genesis up there because I went to see them, and actually listening to a particular song. I was doing a study at the time and I was listening to a particular song and it put me straight back to somewhere else. And it's just so powerful about how art can actually do that to you. So thinking about there are now lots of different methods that are out there that are being used for arts-based research. Narrative has been around a very long time, and narratives are around stories, but I find with narrative studies, I think that again they give the story, but then they can get split up again into themes, which I find if you're going to try and sort of describe a whole person, you're not going to do it so well. But you have stories, you could have reflection, where actually you as the researcher are doing the reflection, or it could be that the participants are providing reflections to you of their experience. Same with diaries, is that looking at people's diaries of their experiences about certain situations. Poems are also very powerful. Now, the poems could be that they have been written by somebody else, by women who have had their babies, or it could be that you create poems as part of the final data presentation, which in hermeneutic research is often done. That's right. And the same with drama, is that you could watch plays and create research around that in relation to birth or films, or you can actually create a play or a drama or a film that shows your data collection. And with film and photos, they can again be very evocative and used in studies, something called photoelicitation methods, where photographs are given to people, and it triggers conversations because of what they see. Or it could be you could give the participants a camera and ask them to go out and take photographs of their world, which you then analyse or you discuss with them to analyse after. There are different ways that photographs are being used, and quite a lot in social research that has been done, and with children, for example, in order to take pictures of their world, etc. So it does help to do that. And Lego these days is used for education purposes. It's used for management, education, and triggering and supporting people in team building, etc. Lego can also be used for research purposes. So it's something else to think about how you can do that. And then craft, which Sue has talked about, is the different types of craft activities, such as knitting, such as sewing, such as making pots, all these kinds of activities, either getting the participants to do it or that you're doing it yourself as a response to the study. So there are different ways that these arts-based methods. I will acknowledge that picture up the top, which is a wonderful Danish researcher who works with women in dance therapy, and she's a researcher, and I met her, and that's she's wonderful. I just thought I'd acknowledge who she is, so you know who she is. But in my study, this is getting even more complex, so don't get too hung about it, is they used the theory of bricolage, which was presenting people as a whole, like a jigsaw puzzle. so that you have different parts of them, which you then put together as a bricolage and representing the whole. So that's another thing perhaps to look into, and I'm not going to go into great detail about. And very quickly, these are some of the things that my participants made as part of their the research process, about the interview process, about the meaning of being a midwife. And this is also some photo elicitation that I did, which I gave them some images of what it's like to be a midwife, some midwifery pictures, which I acknowledge Becky Reed for very kindly providing quite a lot of those photographs for that particular study, and some words as well that were actually, what does it mean to be a midwife? Don't know if you can see, but I can see that there is a difference between the two at the bottom and the two at the top, just by standing back and looking at them without looking at the detail. Is that the two at the bottom is a lot more busy with photographs and with words, and those two were working in a major birth unit in a hospital. The two at the top, they were working as home birth midwives. Quite a contrast, I think, in that. You may not agree with me, but that's how I perceived it to be. And the midwives themselves, there were some comments that they made, and these are just a couple of them, about their experience of using art actually during the process, and about how it felt using it to visit their career and to talk about their experiences. That felt it was actually very extremely therapeutic and privileged to be given the time and space. And then Sally at the bottom wasn't comfortable because she had never been a very arty sort of person. Personally, I think everybody is arty in some way. If you bake cakes, you are arty, but it's a different form. Everybody has something that they have. But what she's saying is that actually she got a lot more out of it than she expected. And to have that time to be able to sit and make and do actually triggered something a lot deeper. And that's the other thing about using arts-based methods within a research opportunity, is that the time and the space, it helps them to breathe and to find the answers to things a lot quicker than actually if you're sitting there and just asking questions. It does trigger a lot more professional conversation. And I couldn't go, oh no, I've forgotten this bit. And these are how I presented some of the data in the end, these bricolages. Each of these squares here are each individual midwife. It's very complex, and I'm not going to go into great detail, but their stories were, each section had a different colour when they were talking about different things. So, for example, it could be clinical practice, it could be their emotions, it could be around the social side of midwifery, it was around education, about spirituality. There were different colours attached to it. And so if you look at that carefully, you'll see that there are different colours for each of the people. Some are smaller than others because they actually presented less data than others did, because they're individual. And so each one does show a different aspect. It just provides a multi-dimensional view of the data, which is something quite different. And if you want to know more about that, you can look at my thesis, which I've given to Sue on the list to look at. And there's lots of pretty pictures in there, and there's lots of pretty colours. So it's not as if it's a heavy thesis to read, I hope. And you'll find out more about me, which you might find interesting. And you'll also find out about my quilt, which Sue mentioned. I can't go without, when I'm talking about arts-based methods, I'm going to talk about this, which was part of my research process of this. Each square is representative of my research diary for 5 years. So the whole thing is part of that, and it's got its own website that you can go and have a look at, which is not complete, and I'm very sorry about that, but that's how things are. But it's there if you want to have a look to see what each of the squares mean, etc. Key thoughts then, just to send away to you, is evidence is not just about words or numbers. Try and come at research from a different way, because we're midwives. So we come from it from a midwifery way. Try and do that. Be prepared to take some risks, i.e. banging your head against a university that might not want you to do something different. But there will be people out there to support you. So just don't go there. And the other thing is to have some fun, because research can be fun. And there's some further reading there, which is on Sue's list. So thank you very much for that race through.
And thank you very much. So the starting point, it links into the history bit, which is lovely. And you kind of, I've scratched in my little notes as I've been listening to both of you. I've been scribbling away all sorts. But I was thinking, it feels, it's when Sarah and Jenny, both of you are talking, that in some ways, in research terms, we as a profession are really quite young. And so this is maybe this sort of challenging and thinking of things differently, and about thinking about having the other words that came into me, it was about working with people. Almost collaboratively, rather than, right, well, you're my, and this is one of the things I think with Sarah, I know with some Indigenous groups or Black and brown people in different countries, one of the problems has been is they've been researched, but they haven't been part of it. It's just they've been a convenient group of people, which is probably why people don't trust research a lot. But anyway, that's another story, I suppose. But thank you so much for getting us into this thought process, because you've both given a huge amount of challenge and creativity in slightly different ways, and yet not. I can see these themes coming around. Now, we haven't got much time, but we do have a couple of questions. And Awa Hadid, hi Awa, is saying you make a good point about different ways of knowing other than the hierarchy of knowledge that we're taught. And how do we begin to dismantle this? Now, this was towards you, Sarah, I think, more. And she then says, the thinking was carrying on here. How do we get traction for accepting these different ways of knowing is what I think I'm asking. That sounds like quite a big question, Awa. I don't know, Sarah, whether you'd want to try and answer.
I think if you can find a supervisor, if you're looking at maybe, I don't know, MSc studies or PhD studies, because for myself, I had to find someone who would be willing to supervise my project. And I think that's the starting point, finding someone who has the same interest as you. And so that would be a starting point, because traditionally, universities don't always send out PhD topics which are of this nature. They're not, they're all scientific, aren't they? So you have to kind of do your searching by yourself. You need to start doing exploring and sending out emails and start to have those communication channels. And then you might find somebody who says, oh yes, I can buy in with you and I can support you. So that's how you should go, I think.
Jenny, did you want to add to that? Because it feels to me as though a supervisor or someone to support your studies is a bit crucial.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think that's absolutely right, and I think it's a huge challenge, as Sarah's already indicated, because of funding, apart from anything else as well. But the fact that actually trying to find people who have had experience of doing arts-based research or doing alternative methods, either within the university itself or even in midwifery, is a challenge. And with the way things are being sort of cut back a bit at the moment, it is hard work. I mean, for me, I was in a different situation because I was doing an educational doctorate. So I was doing an EdD and I was on a program. And the supervisors chose me because they knew what I was going to be doing. Now that was great. One of them was very anti what I was doing.
Oh, okay.
I fully respected her. I mean, they're in education, they were not in midwifery.
Mm.
I mean, she found it really difficult, the way I was going. The other one just embraced me and said, yes, let's do this. And it was so encouraging and so supporting. But it was also making sure that the quality of it was going to be good enough to create new knowledge, which is also what Sarah is saying, that you are creating new knowledge in around diversity, for example. It's important to put that across as saying, this is about new things, and this is what a PhD should be, is about creating new knowledge. And that has to be banged out, because if you're saying, well, actually, I'm just going to go and play, then they'll go, no, you're not going anywhere there. But if you are definitely going to be creating new things by what you're doing, and it can have a small impact or a stepping stone to something else, then it's important. I was going to say to Sarah as well that obviously there's been anthropological studies done over many, many years around Indigenous populations. But I think what Sue said about the fact that it's co-production, or it's around those people actually being able to give their own voices, is what's most important, isn't it?
Yes, I think when you were talking initially, and again, I scribbled down, when you were talking about getting in, looking at different cultures and in a different way, and not forcing them into the sort of Western little square and round holes, whatever. I was thinking, if you're a different culture, I wonder how easy it would be to gather the data and analyze. But also, as you were talking, I was thinking, well, what you're in a way you're saying is you need to be part of that group and partner up with someone who's there, because you might miss something, because if you're in a different culture, you won't ask the right questions, maybe. I don't know. What do you think, Sarah? Am I off the wall?
Yeah, correct. But I think it's about acknowledging that the knowledge was already there. It's been passed down centuries and centuries of knowledge has been passed down. But where is that knowledge? It's half of it is gone, I think.
Yeah.
We don't even explore it. So I think that's the problem. It's kind of mind-blowing when you think about it. Where is that knowledge that those indigenous populations had before colonization? A lot of it's been suppressed, or it's not deemed to be valid because it's not scientific. And that's the issue here, isn't it? Where is that knowledge? Knowledge is knowledge. Doesn't matter how you gain the knowledge. It's still knowledge, isn't it?
Yeah.
You could say that about midwifery knowledge as well.
Yeah.
You know, that there's an awful lot of midwifery knowledge that is disappearing because it's not being gathered, or it's not being taken forward.
Well, then there's a lot, having been through a textbook, there's a lot in a textbook, but there's an awful lot you learn as in practice, and not just in the delivery suite, but in antenatal and postnatal and with babies, the whole lot, that is not in the textbook, that you pick up along the way. And some of it gets into a textbook if you get to write a chapter or whatever, but some it can be lost. So I think both points are really fantastic. Now I've got a comment from Karen Gasper. Hi, Karen. And she says, art is such a powerful language. I love it. That's a good way there. Okay, well, I think we've run out of, I always say this is the shortest hour in the week, and I could listen to you both talking for forever, because you've got there's so many different themes that are shared, and I think we might have to get our colleagues back again for the next story. Jenny and Sarah, there's no escape. But I'm also going to say hello to Italy and Qatar, because I know you were there. You were here, there, wherever, here. And I'd just like to say a huge thank you to Sarah and Jenny for joining us this evening and just setting a few challenges, to say it's not so straightforward, all this research hurdle game. And I like the fact you've got Jenny talking about it actually could be fun, and Sarah talking about, well, think of all the knowledge that's being lost, that we, or you out there, one of you out there, could think about, how could I get that knowledge from this group of people? from listening to their stories, from looking at the way they're moving, look at the way they're dancing and their artwork. I mean, the possibilities are endless. So I think we'll leave you with that. Now, I want to say also thank you to Angela, who's making sure this is all nicely recorded so you can catch up with this. Should have said at the beginning, everything's recorded and this is available and will come to you as a link as well. Do share it with your colleagues, and especially if you're as a student midwife, because I think sometimes research gets this sort of patina of being exclusive, something people in white coats do, and it's not for you and I to do these things. I mean, I'm as the same sort of vintage as Jenny, so I know what it was like before we got research and how exciting it was being involved in research and realizing what it could do for practice for all of us. So share and have a chat with your colleagues and see what they think about research. Fantastic. That's your homework, by the way. This is me as a teacher. Now, next week, we're looking at midwifery education, what next, with the NMCs, Jackie Williams and Tracy McCormack. So that'll be another little challenge, the way we're thinking. And also, I'm going to say my favourite calendar is the link is on your resources. Now, the 5th of March, I can't believe it's the 5th of March already. And your task for today is to bring to mind people you care about and send love to them. And I think that's a good way of thinking about the end of the maternity hour. But I'm also saying, look after yourselves. And I'm also saying, don't forget to book for, there's an infection control seminar on the 25th of March, 1 till 2, with Dr. Rachel McGuire and Professor Dinah Gould. And there's also the Midlands Festival on the 20th of May in Nottingham. So book up for that if you haven't. In the meantime, we'll see you next week. Thank you again to our lovely Sarah and Jenny. This has been fantastic. My brain's buzzing with it all. And thank you so much. And we'll see you next week. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.